Doing?
Oh, good, good. How are you doing?
I'm going really, really well. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat to us today.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Now, mate, I want to say congratulations on both films. I've had a chance to sit down and watch Seance, and I've also had a chance to watch an unfinished version of the new VHS. So, congratulations on both.
Thank you. Yeah, I was wondering. They said that they were sending out screeners of VHS 94, and I have to admit, my first reaction was like, is the film finished? Because the last time I saw it, they were still working on some visual effects and the credits and stuff. So that answers that. But yes, I'm glad you got a chance to see it.
Mate, you work on so many different projects. I know that you've got these two films coming out. You're still working on the Face Off sequel. How do you find time in each day to work on so many projects at once?
Well, the good news now is that I've started kind of directly writing like some of these films collaboratively with Adam Wingard. Like, so Face Off 2, for example, is one where Adam actually comes and like sits in the same room as me and forces me to work. And we actually write the scripts together, which is a lot easier than doing it on your own and kind of just being responsible for everything, because you don't get stuck when you're working with another person. You can kind of always have another brain that's refreshed with new ideas and a new perspective on the scene. So that's been really easy. That kind of helps that process, because we can work kind of quickly together. But yeah, I mean, it really is. Right now we're just trying to take it kind of 1 week at a time. In other words, we're trying to just focus on one project kind of per week, so we don't jump around too much and kind of have a creative loss of focus. Because I think sometimes you really do need to dig into scripts and narratives and really immerse yourselves in them to feel what the story should be doing and what's wasting time or not. So between all the various projects, that we've got going, it sometimes is a little daunting, and I will admit to feeling currently quite exhausted, and in fact, I think I've felt exhausted for the past couple of years, which I imagine other people kind of feel the same way. But yeah, I don't think I've gotten like a good night's sleep in several months. But but on the other hand, you can't complain about that, because like what I'm doing is incredibly like awesome,
Yeah.
certainly at least by my standards, and I'm happy to be doing it. I'm incredibly grateful to be doing it. So, so you kind of have to just like say like, okay, I don't need sleep as much as I need to be working on this draft right now.
I know that feeling. I've actually got what I call a writer's headache today, because I was up until 3 a.m. in the morning messaging my co-writer on a project I'm working on, so I know that feeling quite well. The screenwriters listening to this show are probably really keen to know, how does it work with both of you writing at the same time? Like, does someone throw ideas at the other person while they type, or how does that actually work when you screenwrite together?
Yeah, we have a software that uses like a collaborative tool, so that Adam and I are looking at the same documents on our computers. When I was off doing VHS 94, it was actually that was the challenge, because we were trying to deliver our first draft of Face Off 2 at that time, and or we were hoping to, at least we wanted to get one done as quickly as possible, so we could do like as many internal passes ourselves before showing it to the producers in the studio. And meanwhile, I was up in quarantine in Toronto, and Adam was in Los Angeles, so that was kind of tricky, because we actually ended up doing like Zoom sessions with mobile devices while working at our laptops, where we were both seeing the same document. That was the one time that it kind of felt like we actually like had to figure out how to work. Normally Adam just comes over to my apartment, and we fire up our laptops and just kind of sit next to each other, and I usually do the actual typing, because I've just been doing it for so long. I'm pretty quick at typing out words, and I'm pretty quick at kind of putting together the sentences. But Adam's always got eyes on what I'm writing, and he'll say like, is that it? What if they did this? What if he said that? And sometimes he'll kind of tell me like, specifically what he thinks it should be, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's great, but maybe it's like this. I imagine it's like any kind of pair of writers. I doubt our system is interesting to anyone. It's just kind of interesting to us, because for a long time I wrote these scripts for Adam in like complete solitude, and I wouldn't even tell him what like the guest or your next was going to be. Although I expected him to direct these things when I was done with them, I wouldn't even tell him like what the plot was because I wanted to be like so creatively independent. And now it's like no. Like if we're doing Thundercats, like I want you in the room with me. Because I think that needs to be a more collaborative thing because those are more technical big films in a way, and it's just like it is. Adam really is a director with an incredible sense of character and narrative, which not all directors who don't usually write like can say. Adam was always the kind of director who his number one complaint with a script that I wrote for him it would be if he felt like a character wouldn't do something. If he felt like I can't really tell an actor to do this because I don't think this is quite right, and he's almost always right. He would probably say that he's always right, but he's almost always right. But he does. But I mean, Adam really understands narrative as a filmmaker. I don't know if people fully understand that yet from his body of work, but I think they will. And so so he does kind of think like a writer, and I think that's what's kind of helped us because I love directing and he loves kind of writing. And, so with these, it's just, he has a desk. I have an office in my apartment. He has a little crappy desk next to my nice desk because I'm not going to get a nice desk for my own apartment. That's, why I'm working at his place. Whatever. So the point is he comes over to my place and we put on music and, fire up the document, whether it's, Thundercats or Face Off 2 or one of the other things we're kind of working on right now, some of which is original stuff, we just kind of work in the same room. But there is a project, for example, that Adam's attached to direct right now that I'm writing without Adam.
Yeah.
It's a different project. It's an original project. I came up with the story myself, and so there was no question that like we were going to write that one collaboratively. Adam was like, "That's clearly all you," and he's happy with the script. So it just depends on the project, what the process is, and how that defines itself, I guess.
Yeah. Now talking about your standalone project, Seance, tell us a little bit about where that idea came from, because it's a genre, it's a type of horror that we've seen before, but you put such a great slant on it. It makes it different to anything that we've seen before.
Well, I do want to say that at the time that I was conceiving Seance as like a kind of giallo throwback, I didn't know that James Wan and Edgar Wright and Alex de la Iglesia were also doing giallo throwbacks this year. I thought I was the only one, and I wouldn't have competed because I know that my budget is not at the same level. but it was really that. I love gialli, and I love a certain style of kind of murder mystery. I've called Seance kind of like, my goal with Seance was kind of to create like a sort of cozy slasher. I find slasher mysteries kind of soothing as a horror fan in an interesting way, and I think you can do interesting things with those narratives and with characters within those narratives, and that was my goal. I was inspired by, the films of Argento and, Sergio Martino and the films that inspired everyone who does this sort of thing. But yeah, and of course, like American slasher movies like Scream, Scream being kind of a second wave of postmodern slashers that actually probably influenced me as a filmmaker more than the original slashers. Which, when I was so young growing up watching them that I wasn't very analytical about them. But, when Scream came out and then we got, like, I Know What You Did Last Summer and that little kind of phase, which included The Craft, that was something that I was more, like, I'd already started kind of working, making, like, terrible, short films with, like, a VHS camera I borrowed from the public library, but working as a filmmaker. So, those were the films that I was able to kind of analyze from a filmmaking perspective, obviously my own very amateurish and naive filmmaking perspective at that point in time. But, that led those, I think, to be a big influence on me. And I kind of just wanted to make, a version of those that I thought was really good. And that was my main objective.
Yeah, the relationship between the main characters in the original Craft film is something that we all remember, and you capture that so well with this film with those characters. How long did you spend working on the script when you were talking about the relationship between the characters, how each girl feels about each other, and then of course the romance that kind of creeps in there as well?
Well, I think in the kind of classical murder mystery that I sort of did want to be trying to sandwich into like a supernatural slasher horror package with Seance, which was, again, kind of my main goal with this particular project, was to do something of that nature. There almost always is a romantic element, particularly in the novels of Georgette Heyer. She's really good writer of romances and one of my favorite authors, and certainly her work, particularly with stuff like Envious Casca, was a big influence on Seance. And so, so I kind of did know that I wanted it to be a bit of a love story, and that was sort of the germ of the narrative, actually, was kind of thinking about, like, I don't want to spoil anything, but kind of thinking about the dynamic between those two characters and how they've both kind of lost someone, but find a connection kind of in each other. I really think you just have to approach your characters with kind of excitement and respect towards, like, who they are and what they're going to do within a scene. And then sometimes, once you find that voice, it almost feels like you're channeling, something, not to sound too pretentious, but it almost genuinely feels like you're channeling something greater than your own talent. I'm aware that I'm saying this now, talking about, a low-budget slasher film like Seance, but nonetheless, like, you kind of create the characters, Alice and Bethany and Trevor, you kind of get into a pattern. You find their kind of vocal cadence, you find their kind of personality, and then they kind of tell you how they would interact naturally in a scene. Probably the most fun I ever had doing that was The Guest, where, once I kind of figured out what Dan Stevens' character was in that film, every scene became kind of amusing, because he's going to do something kind of funny. And I think that's kind of the enjoyment of that film, is his character is unpredictable, but in a way that is going to be enjoyable. And I kind of wanted to do something similar with Seance, with Suki's character. You know that she's an outsider. You don't quite know what's up with her. She seems like she's different, maybe a bit older, maybe has a bit of a different agenda than the other girls. But you're not quite sure what's going on. And then, the end of the film does inform you of a bit of that. And I kind of, that was the germ of the story. Like that was my first idea, is like kind of like thinking about that sort of revenge narrative, and then reverse engineering that revenge narrative, because I think I kind of love revenge stories and cinema vengeance, just in general. Obviously, that's a theme I go back to a lot. And kind of reverse engineering that story as a supernatural kind of horror film or murder mystery. So that was the idea. I kind of started with my characters and that relationship and that dynamic, and then kind of figured out what the story was from there, actually.
Awesome. Was Suki always going to be Camille? Was she someone that you had in mind? Because she is absolutely perfect in that role.
Suki is amazing. No, she was not someone that I had in mind when I was writing it. I was aware of her, and I knew her work kind of generally, but I'd only seen The Bad Batch, I think, when I first sat down and met with Suki. I think maybe I'd also seen Assassination Nation at that time, but I really didn't know her overall body of work. I hadn't listened to like any of her music or anything like that until I sat down and met with her, and then I was pretty blown away. I don't know. She's just a very interesting person, and clearly got the humor of the script quite like on quite a nuanced level, and that's not always the easiest thing. Like I think kind of a sense of humor is kind of the most important. Like, sense of humor is kind of the most important point of creative compatibility sometimes. At least when you're doing a film like Seance, which is not entirely a serious movie, but also is not, trying to be overtly comedic at any times, really. You need to find that tone really precisely, and I knew that she would do that. I knew that she had the instincts for that and could do that. As soon as I met Suki, I instantly texted the producers, and I was like I have found Camille, like, for certain. Let's stop looking. Let's stop talking to anyone else. Let's lock her in. Let's get a deal going, and from that, and she was the first person who was cast in the film. We then were able to kind of try to build the cast around her in that lead role. But because I think when she came on board, that's when I think, among other things, my British financiers gained a lot more confidence in the project. So obviously, I'm very grateful to Suki for that as well. But no, she's just phenomenal. I think it's interesting because I think she's a very kind of introspective performer. She'd spend a lot of time alone between takes, kind of listening to headphones. She kind of kept to herself a lot, which I think, is realistic for the character as well. But I think it's also that, there's not a lot of good roles for young women, and I think she really embraced that this was a type of character that no one had specifically asked her to play before, and she really went for that. it's more like I just wish there were more kind of kick-ass, vengeful characters for Suki Waterhouse to play, because I think she tapped into that wavelength pretty precisely, and I'd love to see her do it again. Maybe I have to write her another one.
Definitely.
I would love to work with her again.
Definitely. Well, Simon, we are right out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and again, congratulations on these 2 films.
Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate it.